Okay, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches, depending on where we are at. I am CarlosAlexis Cruz, and I have had the privilege and pleasure to serve our organization as our current president. And today I'll be moderating this panel, and I want to welcome you all to our third keynote. And this one is very dear and close to me as I'm actually talking to some friends and colleagues, but also talking about like what is happening in the arts. And this keynote is called Advocacy in a Challenging Arts Landscape. For this session, we'll be joining industry professionals and engage in this conversation on where we are now, where we are headed, and what we can do together to engage in collective action. For this panel, as Amy noted in the chat, we will have each presenter will have a few minutes to just do some opening remarks. Then I will follow up with some questions just to continue to guide our conversation. And then we will use or try to use the bulk of our session to entertain and partake in a conversation with all audience member and all of you watching. And as Amy noted, if you can use the Q&A function to bring your questions up to the forefront, that would be mostly appreciated. And we encourage you also to use the chat function to express and share thoughts and so on about what has been said and things that we can do together. We will be saving the chat just as a way of coalescing thoughts because, as I said before, we are ATHE, all of us. And in the future of what we can do happens if we are all together in this, connecting as one community. So, without further ado, I'm gonna just introduce the first of our panelists today, and I will give a brief bio before every person, and then they'll share their remarks, and then I'll come back and so on, so that you know. So the first person is Gregg Henry. Gregg Henry is the curator of the annual Page to Stage Festival and the director of the Keynote Performing Artist in Residence program and the artistic associate for Theater for Young Audiences and the artistic director of the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. He has directed for the Kennedy Center Theater for Young Audiences, Mermaids, Monsters in the World, Painted Purple by Marco Ramirez, Norman Allen's The Light Excalibur, Tom Isbell, and Mark Russell's Teddy Roosevelt and the Treasure of Ursa Major and Teddy Roosevelt and the Ghostly Mistletoe, and Barbara Field's Dream in the Golden Country, both at the Kennedy Center and National Tour. Recent productions include Helen Pafumi and Jason Loft's Wonderful Life, Melanie Marnich, Sleeping Country in the Roundhouse Theater, Julius Jensen's Two-Headed for Washington Shakespeare Company, and the U.S. premieres of Morris Panic Curls in the Goldfish Bowl for Metro Stage, and Daniel Markov, you're here for the Theater Alliance. Gregg, welcome and thank you for being here. Your voice at the Kennedy Center is it's paramount and imperative and much needed at this moment. And we'll love to hear from you and your thoughts of this moment in time.
Thank you, Carlos. And hi, everyone. I'm eager to join this conversation today, buoyed by, I think, a really important National Committee meeting yesterday featuring our army of volunteer teaching artists from around the country who make our work work. The logistical efforts that our committee has to deploy in order to make all of our programming really work for our students. And why I say I'm buoyed is because after a few difficult years, some of them maybe even featuring an existential crisis for our organization, we seem to be coming out of what were financial dark times. That may seem counterintuitive, but I think that in this time, our faculty around the country who participate in our organization are recognizing the importance of the gathering after a couple years of the pandemic, and then facing the shocks we're all facing with the current administration. I think I think our colleagues around the nation are recognizing the value of community, are recognizing the value of getting all of their students together in their regions and sharing their experiences. It's been a very important thing to me in my time at the Kennedy Center that however structurally the organization appears to be a contest, and in fact, it's important for some administrators around the country to learn about our organization in NCAA terms in a way that's how they can twig what's going on with participating in KCACTF. It's been very important to me that they might think they're part of a drama contest, but when they get there to the regional conference site, they discover it's about the community. It's about communing with other young artists. It's about communing with other teachers from their region and sharing successes, sharing challenges, fears, and their hopes for their students and for their peers when the students get together. And something must be happening correctly. And again, it feels counterintuitive, but we're charging full speed ahead. And the fact that we encountered at the Kennedy Center such a short, sharp shock in early February, it's all the more moving to me that we were able to proceed with a national celebration of student achievement, national celebration of great teaching, and kind of shut the doors to all that was whirling around them and let them be artists, let them grow as future theater makers. And so I'm coming to this conversation feeling encouraged despite all of the turmoil that we're all facing. Thank you, Carlos.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. And more to follow up in a second, but we will go to our next speaker, and that is Alisha Tonsic. My dear friend Alisha, she joined Theater Communications Group, or TCG, as a co-executive director of National Operations and Business Development in January of 2025, bringing 35 years of art service organization and nonprofit theater experience to the role. Most recently, she served as an executive director of the Network of Ensemble Theaters, where I'm a board member of, where she championed shared leadership structures and collaborative art making practices through the field. Previously, Alisha was the first managing director for Sojourn Theater, working in partnership with the ensemble and founding artistic director Michael Rohd, our other speaker, for nearly a decade. Earlier work includes positions at the American Repertory Theater, Berkeley Rep, Manhattan Theater Club, McCarter, and TCG, and as an independent nonprofit arts consultant focusing on small and mid-sized companies. A first-generation college graduate, she's an alumna of Barnard College, Columbia University, as well as the James P. Shannon Leadership Institute and the inaugural round of TCG New Generations program. Recent board service include the Performing Arts Alliance and Portland Center Stage. Welcome, Alisha.
Hello there, everyone. Thank you, Carlos, for the very lovely introduction. And it's so great to be here with you and so many folks that I have relationships with coming into this, and to have us all seeing this moment from different perspectives, which is really, I think, at the heart of how I am experiencing this and seeing this moment in the field. Really as being, if not another portal moment, like people talked about the pandemic being maybe a continued growth of that portal or layering it out in a different way. Very much agree with the perspective that Gregg was sharing around the notion of this being a moment where people are hungry for that sense of community and communion and coming together. Very much resonates with what I am seeing and feeling too. And I imagine that many of you are as well. I think the core perspective that I'm coming from, sitting in this seat now at TCG at Theater Communications Group, where the mission is to lead for a just and thriving theater ecology. Always the service organizations, whether it's ATHE, TCG, many of our colleagues were always sort of charged with that broader view of the field. And I think for TCG, because it is trying to look at the full theater ecology and all of the pieces in it, it brings those layers into sort of relief and perspective all the more. And particularly in a moment like this, what really comes to the forefront for me is just what a moment of how critical it is right now, the notion of our interdependence, how important it is as we are looking for how on earth we move forward from here in ways that might look very different than they have up to this point, how important that interconnectedness becomes and how we move forward in partnership, in coalition, maybe in unlikely ways, maybe in ways that might bring people together who are not used to being together, or parts of our field together that have not been as strong of partners in the past. So really looking for those opportunity moments where we can really support each other, particularly in financial climates that can be challenging for so many in the field. Where do we put our resources together in ways that we could be more efficient, but for greater impact? And also really be working together at the places that matter the most to all of us. In doing that, that sense of, yes, coalition, yes, community, but from a place of very intentional multiple perspective. I think this moment of pluralism, of ways of seeing and being and experiencing in the world from each of the places we sit, and how that enables each of us to respond differently to the moment in ways that perhaps only we can uniquely from where we're situated. For instance, about a month and a half after I came into, so we have a new leadership structure at TCG, which is this shared three co-ED model. I was the last of the three to come in January. So this new team has only been together really for 6 months. And about a month and a half into it, some of you be familiar with the lawsuit that TCG is a co-plaintiff in, along with our colleagues at National Queer Theater and the Theater Offensive and Rhode Island Latino Youth Arts, that the ACLU is our legal counsel around the NEA and the executive orders and the way that they have been implemented in the guidelines for the current round of grants. And so that opportunity to move into that lawsuit happened when we were just getting our feet wet about a month and a half into our time together. But what we have heard since, it was so clear to us in that moment that it was important for us to step in, particularly in terms of First Amendment and Fifth Amendment rights and how they were being challenged in the way that the NEA was needing to put the administration's perspective into government funding. We have heard since from whether it's foundations that also feel like they are under attack, or other parts of the field, that they are not in a position where they could file a lawsuit. And so they're glad that an organization like TCG did. So I use it as an example of the kind of how can we all find the place that we can fit, knowing that all of these pieces are important. The protests are important, the lawsuits are important, public actions are important, artistic responses are important, advocacy networks, broader coalition building, all important. So how do we coordinate these efforts together and really think beyond ways we have in the past to really meet the moment we're in? I'll stop there for now, I think, maybe, and hand back over, excited for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Much to get into in a second. But let me introduce our third keynote speaker and panelist here, Michael, another friend, Michael Rohd. Michael is a theater maker who has spent 35 years leading process and facilitating conversation around complex public issues across the nation, as well as supporting and training arts, municipal, and nonprofit staff in designing effective community programs, convenings, and public engagement work. He's been a founder and co-leader with three organizations: Hope is Vital, a theater based in HIV prevention work in DC and nationwide in the 90s; Sojourn Theater Ensemble Theater Company from 99 to 2023 in Portland, Oregon and nationwide; and the Center for Performance and Civic Practice, which is an artist collective consulting on institutional and system change work nationwide. He co-founded, co-led Art Train at a National Technical Assistant Program with Extreme Board for the Arts. And he just finished in 4 years as a Civic Collaborations Director with One Nation Project, a national arts and health initiative. And in 2022, he founded Co-Lab for Civic Imagination at the University of Montana, where he serves as a co-lab director and as a university-wide system dramaturg as artist in residence. His largest current creative project from 2022 to 2026 is State of Mind, a touring theater public dialogue coalition building residency about behavioral health and conducting residencies across the Western United States. Whew, a lot. You do a lot, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you, Carlos. Hey, everyone. Hi. It's really nice to be here. I'm happy to be invited. It's nice to be here with friends, both in the participant list and here on the panel. And I have struggled a lot with figuring out what to offer in these first couple minutes, in these moments that we're in, and in the context, really specifically, of this event, this convening. I wrote 3 different versions of what I wanted to say. And I think the first thing maybe I want to say is I want to take a few of my seconds, and I just want to invite us to take a breath together. You can see me. I wish I could see all of you. But just maybe a breath in and out together. Because these are really challenging times for everyone. And particularly, I think everyone here, you work at a university, which can be a pretty rough space and context right now for a lot of different reasons. And I think one of the things that I wanted to bring into this conversation, and it sort of moves off the scaffolding that Gregg and Alicia offered, I think a lot about connection, convening, and coalition. So I'm a theater maker. I've been in and out of universities for a couple decades. I run a lab at one right now. And I think of late, I have been thinking about how the arts community in general and the theater community, in the moment when so many fields are under siege, our advocacy work, which I think is the subject of this particular session, our advocacy work, I think in this moment of stress, tilts towards making sure people understand our value and the importance of what we do. And I do think the arts are valuable and important, and what we do and what you do is super meaningful. But I think it's the wrong tactic. I think in this moment, when we are walking side by side with other fields that are being decimated and dismantled, education, public health, health, science, higher education, justice, environment, so many jobs lost, so many research spaces crumbling and underfunded, So many people trying at the community and grassroots level to do the work they've been doing for years based in compassion and care, for whom that's getting harder and harder. Rural hospitals closing, more and more oppressive legislation targeting the personhood of our neighbors, our family, our colleagues, and friends. The arts and humanities are a part of what's being attacked, but we're not more important than any of those other areas. And actually, we're stronger when we walk in solidarity with those being impacted in those other areas. I think a lot about civic care and all the different sectors and fields that are being dismantled, attacked, targeted, and defunded right now. The arts and culture, humanity field are a part of that, as is higher ed, health, education, environment, justice. When we make a case just for our own importance, our own value, and we don't acknowledge the harm happening in those other spaces, I think we weaken our position. I think we lessen our ability to speak with our neighbors, colleagues, friends, and strangers about what's happening in our communities. And I think if we work in universities right now, if we get caught, as happens in a lot of places, with sort of our piece of the pie and our concern for it, which is real and legitimate and vulnerable, if we don't actually look for opportunities to sort of partner, take hand, walk together, I think we miss the larger narrative. We miss the opportunity to discuss and make the case for how we're all connected and dependent on each other. And I think for me, again, civic care and civic imagination are where those things link up. But I'll give you a really specific university-focused example, and then I'll pass the ball back. I've been for the past 3 years at the University of Montana, where I started this lab. And the first project that we began is a project about behavioral health and mental health. The state where I live right now, Montana, has pretty awful statistics, pretty much the worst in the country when it comes to mental and behavioral health on lots of levels. And so I began a project that would result in a touring show and a set of workshops for youth and adults and a set of coalition meetings and town hall meetings. Spent 2 years doing the research and partner building, and that partner building was on this campus. I'm not housed in a theater department at this university. I'm housed just as a lab that operates independently out of a provost's office. So I spent time building relationships in the School of Health and the School of Education, of course, in the College of Art and Media, and then all over the state with rural health providers, advocates, legislators, organizers. 2 years in, after building that network, we launched a tour. We've so far been to 20 rural and tribal communities around the state of Montana. We have 20 more coming in the next 6 months, 20 more in the 6 months after that. And the reason I'm sharing this particular example is because I didn't expect to be launching the tour 2 months before the election and to get to the busiest time of our tour after the inauguration. I didn't expect to be in the most rural and conservative communities that I've ever spent time in my life. And I've worked in lots of rural and conservative communities, but I spent January, February, March, and April pretty much entirely in rural conservative communities out west, working with folks that I'd been building partnerships with for a couple years and bringing people at this university into those relationships and partnerships. And what I found was this led to a moment where in the past couple months, as the research money is being pulled, and as we're all watching our colleagues struggle in so many different ways, the university, because of the relationships that the lab had been able to build across campus and across the state, made the decision to actually support us and take away our vulnerability in terms of research dollars and support us some with general funds, because they could see not just that we were making meaningful art, but that we were convening people and building coalitions, and that people around the state are telling stories of impact from the theater work we're doing, but also from the connective work we're doing with people across fields and sectors. So the last thing I'll say as part of my intro is, I just want to encourage you, in addition to training your students to make plays, to think about how we train our students to build relational skills and translational skills and facilitative skills and inquiry skills and partnership skills and coalition skills and public engagement skills, how we train them to listen for what others are working on, and how to aim their creative practice at the outcomes that those collaborators are working on in and beyond the arts ecosystem. That we train folks not just to be producers of theater events, but co-creators of civic imagination. I'd like to talk about some of this stuff more specifically, but I'm anxious to hear Carlos and Gregg and Alisha's thoughts, so I'm going to pass it back.
Well, thank you, Michael, Alicia, and Greg for very uh, provocative first statements on this current moment in time, and the way that you all are faring with these subjects and these issues. You can maybe we can take this moment to open it up and be more of a panel, so like you can each speaker can have like their camera on. And while we do that, I'm taken by a few of the thoughts from each of you. From Greg talking about the emphasis in gathering, and also at the same time shutting off the door for a second and allow our students to grow. There's something in that dichotomy, in that, like the two things of like gathering, being present, but also having space for yourself to grow and allow this protective space is needed. And I wanted to uplift that from the things that you said. Alicia, the same deal about community and connection and interconnectedness. I mean, I think a theater communications group, as you oversee that umbrella of many theater companies and theater spaces, observing that and helping us like find ways in which we can truly bridge, as opposed to be in this constant push to siloing or being in separate spaces in a competition as opposed to a collaboration. I'm taken by that, and I wanted to uplift that too. And Michael, so many things, but the fact that you said something along the lines of like we are part of the system, but we're more important than anything else, and that we as artists we have been under attack, but there are so many other things that are also under attack that are equally as important. Talk about hospitals and stuff like that. I think it's a good perspective, because when we are individually under attack, it's really easy I think in the human nature to try to protect yourself, to think just about yourself and not about how do we do so in tangent, in connection with the others are also receiving this similar ways or similar attacks. So thank you all for the three for your sharings at the top, and you've addressed a few of the questions, and I guess I would like to begin with one that talks about structures and models, maybe following a little bit of what you were saying, Michael, because we have certain focuses, I think, in the way that we train our students. And I'm just curious your thoughts, the three of you. And the question is goes like this: the nonprofit regional theater model echoes what is going on in humanities and academia, or is it the opposite? Like that line is like one is emulating the other, but it's trying to like do perhaps the same. The facts is that theaters are closing, funding sources are diverting, or gone. Humanities programs are losing funding, closing, funding sources are gone. And we recognize that we cannot stop any of this. This is our dynamic that are perhaps out of our reach. What do we think of every model that we have had up until this point? And what can be done? Should it be thrown all to the trash and restart from scratch? Do we have the capacity to do that? I guess the bigger question is about the models that we have been following up to this point. What do you see about those models, and what do you think about models moving forward?
I want to hear my friend Alisha talk about models, because she's in the heart of models from TCG's perspective right now, looking at so many different theater organizations. And of course, Greg, at one of the largest models that exists and has such a history. I'm curious how you both think about models at this moment, and then I can pipe in after.
Yeah, sure. Greg, do you want to chime in, or would you like me? Happy to start either way.
Yeah, I want to resist sounding like a Pollyanna and oversimplifying things, but one of the things I have found to be a strength of our work and an insistence of mine is when it's important to the home campus or to the home administration or the home faculty that students come back with a win. As soon as they walk in the door in DC, with us, I tell them, if that's how you want to approach your time with us, you're going to be miserable, because everything that we've got planned for you, whether it's the master classes or whether it's the time visiting theater in Washington, D.C., or the time that you have with each other in the hotels at night or wandering the memorials late into the evening, you're going to be denying yourself a sense of discovering your future collaborators as artists. And to me, that is almost confronting the American model of artist as competitor, artist as someone who needs to get ahead. And we have found that, I have found that the students seem fuller when they leave, because they can drop all that, the gnashing of the teeth, the jutting of the jaw, and the shoulder forward, because they're in a room where they're being encouraged to work together. And again, I don't want to sound Pollyanna, because there is still a competitive edge out there, but I've seen the students grow when that pressure is taken from them, or at least you don't have to do that while you're here with us. So I'll just say that and toss it back.
I'm going to chime in from maybe a very different perspective, just thinking in terms of the overall nonprofit regional theater model structure, sort of how I think many of us think of the sort of core of the professional nonprofit theater world, kind of how that moves forward. Um, it's so easy because in all of our generation who are in the core of our professional lives now, our own lives, that has only ever been, right? But it's so easy to forget that that model that we think of as the model is 60 years old, as is the NEA, as are all of the way these things are structured in the US. So to is there an opportunity for that to free us a little bit into some more expansive thinking of, in this small blip, while it may have been the fullness of all of our current lives, how do we think more expansively about what came before that, what has actually always existed alongside it. Certainly having come from Network of Ensemble Theaters and the ensemble movement into TCG that is representing a much larger swath of field, it does always underpin for me, yes, there is the LORT model, yes, there is the large institutional regional theater model. There's also the ensemble model that has been around for just as long or longer. There's community specific organizations and culture and movement that have been around forever. So what are the ways in a moment like this to be looking beyond just this smaller current moment, forward and backwards, to what is actually more community rooted, uh, cultural ways of organizing that have actually transcended um, the particular moment that we're in, whether it's indigenous wisdom, whether it's the way many have been moving all along. But what are the lessons in that as we look beyond just a capitalist model that worked for a certain period of time and a certain set of circumstances, the way particular funding was set up for a certain number of decades. And even looking within that, when we look at that model, even did it ever fully work for everyone for that full period of time? I think no, so really trying to see inside it what those opportunities might be if we think more expansively.
Carlos, shall I share a thought or do you want to move us forward somewhere else?
Um, no, if you have some thoughts, please do.
I think I just want to add to, I think like Alisha, you were just sort of getting at this interdependence notion. And I think I just want to mention, since a lot of people here are at universities, probably not everybody, but a lot, we all know that universities, have unique particular cultures. There's some similarities, but they're so different in scale and location and the way they function and their economic context. Um, but I feel like one thing I have observed with theater programs, with arts programs and entities within universities is that because we're talking about models, so maybe to talk less for a moment about the nonprofit model and sort of how models work in the university, I, I find that it can be very useful, but hard to sort of reach out beyond the work that's happening in our department or our particular school and look for relationships with people across the campus. And this, to me, parallels the nonprofit theater, which very frequently does not have the energy or capacity to look beyond its own building or small staff or team or even arts ecosystem. In both cases, how do we start to build a habit where we're actually looking beyond our walls and beyond the relationships that seem likely to areas and sectors and fields and individuals working in other realms who we might not just build relationships with for the sake of connecting, but be curious with? Sort of attempt to learn about things happening on other parts of campus, attempt to learn about things that are happening in other sectors in the community where our theater lives. And by being curious in those ways and by building those relationships, they don't just lead to transactional partnerships for particular projects like, hey, we're doing Laramie Project this season. Let's make sure we connect with this unit because it'll help us get big classes in. And, they have a text that we can connect to what we're doing. That's great. But what about like starting a relationship that can live for years because you start to try to explore what's going on in that department that is actually going to feed what we're trying to do over here? How can our students work together? How can we find content overlaps? And most importantly, how can we begin to believe in shared value, that we both bring value to the campus or the community, whether we're talking university and department or arts institution and community? We're talking silo and territory very frequently and sort of lack of capacity. So how, if you're in a theater department and you're on this Zoom and you're just trying to keep it going, you're trying to figure out where the funding is, you're trying to figure out how to prepare your students by building their curiosity to engage beyond the people in the rooms that they're always in and build their capacity to build relationships and want to learn. Their art will get stronger, but they will be more employable. I don't mean outside the arts. I mean, they'll be able to work as teaching artists, civic artists, theater artists in lots of contexts. So grow your circle, grow their circle, build the skills needed to grow circles, and both at the institutional arts org model and the university department model, kind of deepening and expanding these capacities and our interests and our aperture makes new models more possible. We will not find new models, which we desperately need, by talking to the same people and looking for the same outcomes and the same ways of working. Thanks, Carlos.
Carlos, may I say
Yeah.
something?
Yes.
Just for about 5, maybe 6 years, we've added a recognition in our national awards program, which we've called the Citizen Artist Award. And it's recognizing theater programs, producing entities on a campus who make themselves part of the conversation writ large on campus and not simply be a piece of entertainment for the weekend, but taking advantage of the political scientists on campus, the public health programs on campus, the literature departments, et cetera, and making sure that a school who is doing this work and dealing with outreach and being, as you said, Michael, curious, we're recognizing them for that. And that's something, again, to put in their hand that they can take their administration, say, see, it's not just collaboration between designers and director or designers and actor. it's also collaboration with our academic community. And we send them a certificate or a plaque for that as well. And it started as maybe we had 5 being recognized with that. And this year we had, I think it was 22 schools that were being recognized with the Citizen Artist Award.
Um, Maybe this is a good time to intersperse one of our questions from our attendees here. There's a question addressing what's happening with the NEA and people choosing to perhaps not apply for these funds just as a way to just not engage with that conversation. But if we choose to do that, then we are perhaps forfeiting this fund and just maybe abiding. So what would be the best call to attention to this is the question, who in the House of Senate we could, we should be champion, connect with, and so on. And there's a follow-up question, can ATHE, TCG, the Kennedy Center form an alliance to lobby for funding for the arts in a different way? So I guess, yeah, the question behind is, we know the NEA is not the end of all, but at the same time, it's being very supportive of many spaces. Also, like private philanthropy is changing, as we all know. So if any of you can shine a little bit of light, I know we're kind of running out of time, so we're going to be going very quickly on what to do and how do we coalesce on this matter.
I'll try to jump in really quickly just on the sort of traditional advocacy front. There are a lot of coalitions that have been in existence for a long time, and there are always new ones developing that are bringing together many of the organizations working around these things to find common cause and to look for messaging and ways forward that are going to have the most impact. Certainly Americans for the Arts have always been leading that charge in a larger way. They have new leadership. Aaron Harkey has come in, and there is some significant change about to start happening there. But there are a lot of behind the scenes groups that work. There's the Cultural Advocacy Group and Performing Arts Alliance that are many of the ATHEs, the TCGs, sort of all coming together within the arts and the performing arts to be doing this sort of small a and big A advocacy, not just NEA, but broader. I would say definitely tune into the public facing work that you can see come out of places like AFTA. Certainly TCG has a strong advocacy wing and a lot of advocacy alerts and that sort of thing that can plug you in to what's already happening. The piece that I'll say really quickly, though, because I think it speaks to this intersection that Michael and Gregg are getting at and that we're talking about as well, and that is university based, is there are also these ways, I'm thinking about, some of you may know about an action that is being planned for this fall in September in the Bay Area that is a broader artistic response to Project 2025. So not NEA funding specifically, not arts funding specifically, but in a broader context. And it is being organized by California State University folks, and it's using a model that they used back in 2012 around the faculty association, the trade union at the university. The dance departments and the theater departments were basically organizing sort of flash mob like dance choruses within which then there was content that floated back and forth between the political content and then the dance breaks. They're using a similar model to do a larger region-based response that is being led by the university professors and arts departments. So using those kind of models as examples of how to engage, again, on these different platforms in different ways and across coalition.
Awesome.
Alisha, what's the name of that program? Do you happen to know the formal title of that?
Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the
Okay,
link for us about there.
Okay. Um, Thank you, Alicia, for that, and we can continue the conversation also in the chat as we move to the next question. This is perhaps bringing it back a little bit to ATHE in using that and using your example, Alicia, as a springboard here. Our membership at ATHE is comprised primarily by professors and educators of students who are interested in making a career in theater, or performing arts. What do we say to them? How do we continue to motivate and engage our students for a life after college? How do we even do that for ourselves? Speaks a little bit of each of you have touched a little bit on this, but I think if we can go a little bit deeper in some of these thoughts.
I think that we tell them that there are so many ways to be an active and employable and needed artist in our communities right now, and that those ways are not limited to making plays. And that if we are training our students only to make plays and not in the broader skills of theater and how they can deploy and aim those skills in different contexts at community process, at public engagement, at coalition building, at collective visioning and imagining, at problem solving, if we are not preparing them to do that work, we are failing them. Because there is not a career for every student that we train as a theater major in the making of plays. But there are careers for our theater practitioners that include that and include other ways of being teaching artists, civic artists, and artists in community. Too many ways, too many stories, too many examples to go into on our brief Zoom. But wow, happy to go into that in depth with anybody off of this. But there's plenty of people. Daniel Banks is on this call. Daniel's been doing that for years and years with lots of people. I'm sure there's other people on this Zoom who I don't know or hear who do it as well. But the main thing is, if you're on this call and you're wondering, how do I motivate my students as I watch nonprofits sort of crumbling at times, it's that you don't tell them that nonprofit theater is the only option for them as an artist. That can't be the only reason that they are training. And that when they make a great play and they get to take it to the Kennedy Center, that they should revel in that and celebrate it and grow from it. And that they should be thinking about how not just the content, but the practice and process of what they're doing there that brought them there is applicable and useful in so many spaces. And our communities need coalition, social connection, problem solving, public engagement, and collective visioning. And they are hopefully training with skills that make them employable, useful, needed, and necessary wherever they choose to live.
Thank you, Michael. I don't know if Alicia or Greg want to add anything to this,
Great.
or
I say ditto. How's that?
okay, good. There's a question in the chat from a colleague here that I think is going a little bit more specific of the role of the artists in our departments. It says like in theater and academia, how are we advocating for immigrant and trans non-binary people?
I can respond quickly. I was actually just typing a response. Just a couple of things to throw out very quickly. This is by no means, there's a lot going on out there, but I can speak to just a couple of things quickly that TCG has happening right now. The summer issue of American Theater Magazine that is about to hit, if it hasn't hit already, is focused on immigrants and international artists. There's a lot of really beautiful work in that issue that could be a useful resource. I'll point you to, and I'll drop a link in the chat. We also just launched and awarded the first round of a new grant program that is specifically for trans women of color theater artists called Fun for the Dolls, and just awarded $50,000 out directly to trans women in that fund. So, small drops in the bucket, but just to mention a couple of things that are starting to happen.
I think the only thing I would add, again, this is a huge conversation and one of the most pressing issues of our moment, period, is I've gotten to be involved with a couple universities in the past few months who are simply making it a priority to make sure they are clear and public in their articulation of caring for our most vulnerable residents in their university communities right now, which means naming those communities and their ongoing care for them, which means finding ways privately, safely to speak to members of those communities and listen to them and find out what they need right now and try to provide those supports, sometimes publicly, sometimes privately. And then, of course, I think every conversation and debate right now gets nationalized immediately. And although ICE is national, that is federal and national, particularly when we start talking about trans rights and what's happening around the nation, that's very local. That is community to community, state legislature to state legislature, school district to school district. So if that is something that one wants to engage in and be really involved, you have to learn what's happening at your state house. You have to learn where one can be a useful advocate and how local artists and students can contribute to that. And actually, there's so much misinformation. Sometimes civic engagement means just civic literacy. And sometimes civic engagement means civic participation. Artists are very well positioned to do the work of understanding and then synthesizing and expressing to help civic literacy and around our most vulnerable residents, both helping them understand actually what's happening right now and helping other communities understand how they can support those residents. There's a lot of useful civic literacy that artists can contribute to. So that's a way as well.
Yeah, well said, you all. And uplifting also here because I find the most vulnerable communities, including disabled communities and so on. So bringing that also to the forefront and to the recording here, not just in the chat. We have about 5 minutes to wrap up, and I think it's a moment in which we can begin some parting words, and perhaps that can be along the lines of what's next? How do we move forward from here in a collective action? How can we lead amid all of this with joy?
Carlos, can I ask Greg, just because I feel like there hasn't been a ton of space and probably purposeful to talk about the incredible context, the challenging context that you're in right now? I would love to hear, any thought from you about what it is to walk into the space you're in and move through that work with joy, which I know you do because you're supporting so many people in
Mhm.
this large program and so many people on this Zoom have been affected by that work. How do you walk in that environment with joy?
Well, I was thinking about that with the previous subject, with our immigrant students and with our LGBTQ students, our trans students, our hearing impaired students, our wheelchair users, and recognizing that we have some executive orders that address those, not address those, forbids those, I suppose, and how it was just up to us, it has been up to us to simply say, no, you're welcome here, and we need to learn from your artistry, students, kids, and hopefully uh, I have to put an ellipses on that because I can't finish that sentence in any effective way. But we welcomed and celebrated and protected, I'll say, members of those populations in April at the National Festival at the Kennedy Center. And to directly address your question, Michael, it's the institution feels like that someone's pulled the pin on the hand grenade and everyone's walking around waiting for it to explode. And there have been quite a few that have gone off already. We have a lot of colleagues who are no longer with us, whether they were let go or whether they said, I can't keep working like this. And I think what's worked in our favor is that the outcome of our gathering in April was an 18 and a half, 19-page press release of in celebration of the achievements of colleges and universities around the country, both as institutions, citizen artists, as I mentioned before, Brave Rehearsal Space recipients, production work, and then individuals. We were able to generate 18 and a half pages of good news for the institution that there has not been a lot of good news coming out of the institution. And those in authority recognize that. And so where some of our recognitions and some of the things we are celebrating students for may be on some lists that are covered in some executive orders, the good news overwhelmed it all. The fact that the Kennedy Center was able to celebrate the achievement of these individuals and these institutions proved to outweigh the rest. I'm trying to be diplomatic and address the positives that I can find here. We've been able to keep our head down and do our work, while mourning, while grieving the loss of friends, the loss of colleagues, the loss of programs. And back to something that Alisha said, and the model question that was brought up mid-conversation here is that we have leadership now that are trying to treat our institution on a for-profit model rather than a not-for-profit model. And that's the new friction. That's the new tension that we're faced with. Really challenging at this point. So that's another one we could talk for hours on this.
Yeah. Thank you, Greg, for that, and Alisha and Michael for your thoughts here. We've reached our time here. I can speak with you all for at least another hour, if not more, on this. It's been, from my perspective, inspiring, factual, like bringing facts to the table, the things that we cannot ignore that are happening, but certainly a call to really examine how to do things differently in an effort to be, I think, more supportive of everything and everyone that is being impacted at this moment, and in there, perhaps finding some sustainability of the work that we want to do, I think, moving forward. I like your metaphor there to wrap up, Greg. Like sometimes you just like put your head down and keep doing the work, but while mourning still what is happening, because there's many losses that are happening around us, and also not losing track and listening to the others, as Michael and Alisha were saying, because we are in this sort of together. So we do our part of the work, a work that we do in connection and in tangent with other people, um, and from other disciplines and other perspectives and other professionals in other areas. But I think the encouragement here today is to really examine what it is to be artists, what not just theater makers and theater players and the creation of plays, as you were saying, Michael, just to the role of the artist to train artists and to be artists for our communities that need us right now and moving forward. So thank you all. I'll wrap us up here, unless you want to say one or two more words at the end here, and then let our colleagues go and continue to enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos.
Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you.
Carlos.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, gang.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good to see everybody.
I gotta run.
Have a great day.